Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yatkripatamaham bande Shri Gurudintarinam Yatkriptam Vande Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Katanchana Smrite Yasmin Dushkaram Sukaram Bhavet Vismrite Viparitam Syat Shri Chaitanyam Namamitam. So, Rudradi Prabhu, could you kindly share screen? Any volunteers to read today? Rudradi Prabhu, I think that you'd have to do it. Actually, my voice is a little bit hoarse since last 2 days. It's improving.
Okay, Prabhu. Vrindavan, August 4, 1974. When Prabhupada's car pulled up at the ISKCON property at Raman Reti, a group of devotees greeted him with kirtan and flowers. Some 25 devotees from temples around the world had already gathered for the grand opening celebration. And along with the Vrindavan devotees, they crowded happily around Srila Prabhupada. No formal walkways had been constructed, and Prabhupada walked through the half-constructed walls, past piles of sand and bricks, making his way toward the deity house. Even here, the lack of ornamentation and finishing was apparent, and rubble lay all around. What is this? Prabhupada demanded as he toured the construction site. There is nothing here. Where's the temple? He told me the temple was finished. Gurudas, Surabhi, Gunarnava, and others directly responsible were unable to answer. Their faces went white. Prabhupada was furious. How can you open this? The visiting devotees also began speaking among themselves. It's not ready. How can we open? But Prabhupada, said one devotee, devotees from all over the world are coming. Stop them immediately, Prabhupada said. There will be no opening. Prabhupada had burst the bubble, the illusion that they would be ready for the grand opening. Prabhupada's anger was frightening, and the devotees who surrounded him were no longer carefree and joyful. You are going to open this temple? Prabhupada scoffed. The altar is ready, said Rishikesh, who had come from Japan to attend the opening.
Harikesh, said Harikesh.
Oh, said Harikesh, who had come from Japan to attend the opening. We can install the deity and you cannot open this temple, Prabhupada shouted. This temple is not completed. Prabhupada then walked into his house, followed by the Vrindavan managers and a few other leaders. Whoever could keep his distance from Prabhupada in this mood considered himself spared. Surabhi's wife ran off to pray to Krishna, afraid of Prabhupada's ferocity. In his room, Prabhupada's anger only increased. He yelled at Gurudas for mismanagement. He yelled at Surabhi. He yelled at all of them. No one dared to offer suggestions or excuses. There was nothing to do but turn white and become depressed. Prabhupada suddenly inquired whether the temple could be opened despite the mess. Can you have the deity rooms ready at least? He turned to Surabhi. This is an insult to our society. What will people think who have announced it everywhere? Nobody actually knows about it, Srila Prabhupada. Surabhi replied fearfully, exposing herself for another blast. Oh, Prabhupada somewhat changed his tone. You have not made any propaganda about it? No invitations? Not yet, Prabhupada. Not to the people in Vrindavan. They do not expect it to open because everyone who has been here can see it is not possible to open. They know it's not ready. This is a farce, Prabhupada scowled. It is a fiasco. Disgusted, he looked at his Vrindavan managers. We have to open. How can we open on Janmashtami? Srila Prabhupada, Surabhi said, the doors are not ready. They are still cutting the wood. Prabhupada inquired about the deities from Yamuna, who explained that their paraphernalia had been purchased, but that the thrones were not ready. What is your opinion? He asked her. I'm totally unqualified to speak, Yamuna said, and although I have no right to speak, I see it as almost impossible to actually open the temple. There is no pujari. With a sense of finality and failure, Prabhupada said, then we won't do it. But we have invited so many people from all over the world to come. I was not informed of this. Now you all decide. When can we open? Prabhupada asked. Can we open on Diwali? When is Diwali? October, Srila Prabhupada. How about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's appearance day? A devotee suggested. That's at the end of December. Prabhupada was silent, looking displeased. Surabhi spoke up. It will take 6 months, actually 7 months. Then Prabhupada chose the day of Ram Navami in April. The opening could coincide with the annual gatherings of devotees in Mayapur and Vrindavan. Surabhi spoke again. He had grown pessimistic from his experiences with construction in India. It depends on whether we can get the cement, Srila Prabhupada, he said. We have to get it from the government. That was the main obstacle preventing us from opening now. We could possibly have the opening in 3 months if we get the cement. If we could get cement. All right, Prabhupada said, resigned. There was no use trying to set a date. It will be done before next Janmashtami. His tone was sarcastic. And if the cement can be obtained, it can be done after 3 months. Later, while meeting with various individuals, Prabhupada continued to express his displeasure, especially to Guru Das. He asked questions but was dissatisfied with the answers. He asked Guru Das to bring the financial records. Then he reprimanded him more. Finding a receipt for Guru Das's stay in an expensive hotel in Jaipur, Prabhupada made an issue of it. Guru Das became aloof. When Prabhupada finished talking with him, Guru Das returned to his room, staying there unless Srila Prabhupada called for him. Prabhupada began talking and changing the temple precedents in Vrindavan. Talking about changing the temple precedents in Vrindavan, he suggested Harikesh. Gurudas and his wife, he said, could be in charge of the guest house, which was as yet only a hole in the ground. He called Gurudas again and asked what he thought of his managing the Vrindavan guest house, suggesting he go to the Jaipur guest house in Vrindavan for ideas about management.
Jaipuria
guest house in Vrindavan. But Prabhupada, Gurudas said, they charge such low rates at the Jaipuria guest house. I'm sure those rates must be subsidized. This Mr. Jaipuria is a Marwari businessman, Prabhupada replied. He's not losing money on the guest house. He's making money. This is the art of management. That you have to learn by going there and seeing but Gurudas felt too exhausted by the austerities of living and managing in India, where Prabhupada's attention and criticism were so demanding and intense, and where everything was so difficult. He and his wife began to think of leaving Vrindavan. Prabhupada continued to pressure Suravi, calling him in at different times of the day. Why aren't these DT doors up? Prabhupada demanded. I'm trying, Srila Prabhupada, Suravi replied. There are so many things to do. Never mind, Prabhupada said. You have to get it done. These hired men are all cheating you. Don't let them cheat you. It is not easy for all these devotees to collect money. It is all Krishna's money and can only be used for Krishna's projects. Protect that money and see it doesn't go in the hands of the wrong people. I don't want the contractors to become rich men because of our projects, and I want the marble on that building. Where is the marble? Where can I get marbles? Ravi asked. Why are you asking me these questions? Prabhupada shouted. You're the expert. I don't know. Use your intelligence. Ultimately, Prabhupada's anger with his disciples was incidental, the reaction due them for their foolishness. It was also a way of instructing them and testing them. But deeper was Prabhupada's transcendental impatience and frustration that his devotional service in Vrindavan was still not manifested. He wanted a wonderful temple for the glory of Krishna conscious movement. Glory of the Krishna conscious movement, a temple that would establish Krishna consciousness all over the world. It was an offering to his spiritual master, and he had promised it to Krishna, but still it was not completed. As for Prabhupada's disciples' failure to do the job, Prabhupada had to take the burden and the agony of that failure. His disciples were his instruments in his service to Krishna. If the instruments didn't work properly, then he suffered, just as when one's arms and legs fail to function, the whole body suffers. His disciples' failure to carry out his desires was his loss. In this way, he felt transcendental lamentation over their failure to open the Krishna Balaram Mandir on Janmashtami day. Prabhupada's disturbance, though transcendental, was nonetheless real. It was not feigned merely for instructing, nor could the devotees cheaply cheer up their spiritual master. For Prabhupada's disciples to properly assist him, they would have to understand his transcendental mood and serve him accordingly. Prabhupada wanted practical, down-to-earth service from his disciples. They should not expect to serve him sentimentally, but should work hard. Devotional service was dynamic. Prabhupada wanted his disciples to help him with his projects to serve his Guru Maharaj projects, which, if successful, could save the world from misery. Getting concrete was a big problem. Suravi, Gunarnava, Tejas, and others were always meditating and striving how to get cement. Yet it seemed no cement was available in the whole of India, as month after month they waited for government permission. Daily, since Prabhupada's arrival for the so-called temple opening, the devotees had been traveling by bus and rickshaw to Mathura to see if cement, even a few bags, was available. Sometimes they were cheated. One shipment of 20 bags had been cut with other materials, and when they used it in the casting, when they used it in casting a column, it remained soft for 4 days and finally crumbled. When at last enough cement arrived to complete the work, the devotees felt sure it had happened only because of Srila Prabhupada's presence. Prabhupada had Gunarnava count every bag of cement as it arrived. From 8 in the morning until 9:30 at night, the shipment kept coming on trucks. Each truck with 4 coolies had to carry the heavy bags on their backs into the storage shed. Gunarnava stood outside all day with pad and pen, marking the receipt of each bag. Srila Prabhupada came out of the house several times and watched gravely. In the evening, they were when they were finished, he called Gunarnava in. So how many bags? Prabhupada asked, and Gunarnava gave the exact figure. Everything is locked away now? Prabhupada asked. Yes, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada talked about the cement as if talking about a shipment of gold. August 12. Prabhupada felt very weak. It was on the afternoon of his appearance day, and he was sitting at his desk in the main room of his house. He lay down on his seat and put his head against one of the arm pillows. The following day, he felt so weak he could not walk or stand. He had no appetite and ran a fever of 104 degrees. A local doctor arrived and examined Prabhupada. Malaria. He prescribed some medications, which Prabhupada took once or twice and then refused. A second doctor came and prescribed different medicines. Stop bringing these doctors, Prabhupada said. No doctor can cure me. It was August, the monsoon season, and many devotees fell sick. One Shrutakirti, who had recently returned to his post as Prabhupada's personal servant, contracted malaria. Kuladri, who had come to Vrindavan to attend the temple opening, volunteered to assist. Then Kuladri got malaria. Other devotees became ill with malaria, jaundice, dysentery, and various digestive problems. The weather was overcast, hot and humid, and thousands of varieties of insects began appearing. For several days at a time, the sky would be cloudy, the temperature in the 90s. Then the sun would come out and steam everything up with almost intolerable heat. It was Vrindavan's most unhealthy season. As Prabhupada's condition worsened, the devotees became morose and even fearful for their spiritual master's life. They brought Prabhupada's bed out where it was cooler, on the small patio outside his house. His servants would massage or fan him. Days passed and Prabhupada didn't eat except for a few grapes and some slices of orange. This was his way. This was the way his father had died, he said, by not eating. Such remarks frightened Prabhupada's disciples all the more, and they began visiting the samadhis of the Goswamis to pray that Prabhupada would be cured. One evening, Harikesh, stayed up all night near Prabhupada's room, chanting softly a continuous kirtan of Hare Krishna. Prabhupada liked it. This kirtan, he said, is what actually gives us life. After that, devotees took turns, so that there was always kirtan. Prabhupada explained that his illness was due to the sins of the ISKCON leaders, 80% of whom were not strictly following the rules and regulations, he said. Even in Vrindavan, some of the devotees weren't strictly rising at 4 a.m. Since Prabhupada was speaking little, he had only briefly mentioned this because of his illness. But brief as it was, it crushed his disciples. As for who was guilty, each disciple would have to say for himself. But in the mood of, "Oh God, what have we done?" all the disciples in Vrindavan immediately became very attentive to the rules and regulations. In the morning Bhagavatam class, the devotees who lectured regularly discussed the subject and as explained in Srila Prabhupada's books. At the time of initiation, Krishna absolves the initiate of all karmic reactions due for past sinful acts. The spiritual master, however, as the representative of Krishna, also shares in removing the disciples' karma. Krishna, being infinite, can never be affected by such karma, whereas the spiritual master, although completely pure, is finite. The spiritual master, therefore, partially suffers the reactions for his disciples' sins, sometimes becoming ill. Jiva Goswami wants that warns that the spiritual master should not take too many disciples because of the danger of accepting an overload of karma. Not only does the spiritual master accept the previous karma of the disciples, but if the disciples commit sins after initiation, then for those also the spiritual master may sometimes become ill. Prabhupada said that his misdeed was accepting so many disciples, but he had no choice for spreading Krishna consciousness. The spiritual master sometimes suffers, he said, so that the disciples may know, due to our sinful activities, our spiritual master is suffering. And this always had a sobering effect on any would-be offender. But now, for the first time, Prabhupada was specifically blaming his disciples for a serious illness. By neglecting their spiritual master's most basic instructions, they were causing him great distress. They understood that their spiritual master was no ordinary malaria victim, and they knew they had to correct their mistakes and pray to Krishna that Prabhupada would get better. Prabhupada's condition was so critical and the implications of his statements so broad that his secretary, Brahmananda Swami, thought it best to notify the entire International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Because Prabhupada was pleased by the 24-hour kirtan, Brahmananda Swami thought that this program might be introduced in every ISKCON temple in the world. A few telegrams were sent, a word quickly spread that every temple should hold continuous kirtan, petitioning Krishna for Prabhupada's recovery. It reminded some of the senior disciples of 1967, when they had stayed up all night chanting and praying for Prabhupada's recovery from an apparent heart attack. At that time, Prabhupada had encouraged them to chant a hymn to Lord Nrsimhadev and to pray, "Our master has not finished his work. Please protect him." Due to the sincere prayers of the devotees, Prabhupada had said Krishna had saved his life. Now, in 1974, there were many more devotees than in 1967, and all of them were praying for Prabhupada's recovery. But now also, from what Prabhupada had said, there were more devotees to misbehave and cause him pain. That message, 80% of the leaders of my disciples are not following the rules and regulations. This is why I'm suffering, was not telegrammed. It was too heavy. Prabhupada had come to Vrindavan for a celebration, but there had been none. Now he was very sick, and his servant was carrying him in his arms to and from the bathroom. Other devotees were also massaging and serving him very sincerely, and there was always kirtan for him. Meanwhile, he simply depended on Krishna and waited to get better so that he could go on with his work. While he tolerated his condition as the mercy of Krishna, he suddenly received word from the governor of Uttar Pradesh that the governor of Uttar Pradesh was coming to visit him. The governor, a Muslim named Akbar Ali Khan, was traveling in the area, and Seth Bisanchand, a friend of Prabhupada's and the governor's, had recommended that the governor visit the temple. Prabhupada thought that perhaps the governor would agree to help the devotees, at least in the matters as getting government permission for steel and cement. Therefore, despite his failing health, he insisted that the devotees hold a reception in the courtyard, and he would personally go out and greet the governor. Lying on his back and speaking in a faint voice, he ordered a feast to be cooked and tables and chairs to be arranged in the courtyard. The devotees pleaded with Prabhupada to allow them to do everything themselves and tell the governor that Prabhupada was very ill. "He has come," Prabhupada said. "I have to go out and meet him." Shruta Kirti dressed Prabhupada in fresh silk dhoti. Prabhupada tried to apply the Vaishnav tilak to his forehead, but even that was a struggle, and took more than 5 minutes. When they were ready to go, Prabhupada asked his servant, "Have I put on my tilak?" He seemed almost delirious from the fever and was unable to stand. Shrutakirti and others carried him in a chair and placed him in the middle of the courtyard, where they had arranged several tables with prasadam and Prabhupada's books. Just before the governor's arrival, many policemen and soldiers arrived, roping off the area, directing traffic in front of the temple, and holding people outside until the governor arrived. Gunnar Naba had rolled a long red carpet from the edge of the property into the temple courtyard, and devotees lined both sides of the carpet, chanting with kartals and mridangas. When the governor arrived, Surabhi presented him with a garland. Immediately removing the garland, the governor walked down the red carpet into the courtyard. Prabhupada stood. The devotees were amazed to see Prabhupada standing straight and shaking the governor's hand. Prabhupada and the governor stood together for a while and then sat down. Except for the guests, everyone present knew that Prabhupada was not capable of much exertion. They saw him shivering and trembling, yet trying to smile and be gracious with his guest. The devotees were in great anxiety, thinking that Prabhupada's life might end at any moment, and yet they took the part in the sociable pretense along with their spiritual master. The governor, on invitation, gave a speech talking about how India's future lay in industry. Then Prabhupada stood to speak, leaning against his chair. His eyes were very dark, and he barely able to focus his vision. Although he had spoken very little for almost 2 weeks, he now spoke for 20 minutes, while the governor listened politely. After Prabhupada sat and honored prasadam with the governor and his entourage of 15 ministers, After the governor left, the devotees carried Prabhupada back to his room, where he collapsed with a 105-degree temperature. The political guests and military escort gone, the temple site returned to its usual quiet, and the devotees resumed their soft kirtan chanting by Prabhupada's bedside. Amazed at Prabhupada's strength and determination, they realized how little they themselves were actually putting forth in Krishna consciousness. After 2 full weeks, Prabhupada's fever finally broke. A great ordeal was now over. The monsoon was ending, but the same problems of temple construction persisted. And so did Prabhupada's determination. His disciples also felt determined, and they resolved to work through all the bureaucratic delays and slow labor conditions. Now, no one was going to neglect spiritual regulation. Prabhupada spoke no more about his illness, and devotees around the world were informed of his improvement. They could stop the emergency kirtans and go on with work as usual. Prabhupada also resumed his usual duties regarding the temple construction. One thing was clear, however. Prabhupada was completely spiritual, and the devotees working with him had engaged in a spiritual contract, a contract based on love and trust. He was taking their karma, and they had promised to follow his instruction. Now, despite his disappointment in them for their failures, that contract was still in order. If he continued to give his causeless mercy, then they could carry out his orders. Otherwise, they were without spiritual strength. For Prabhupada, there was never a question of not continuing. Even when he had suffered illness on his disciples' account, he never thought to abandon them. After more than 2 weeks of not translating, Prabhupada resumed his work. He had been working quickly on the Chaitanya Charitamrita and was up to the discussions between Lord Chaitanya and Sanatan Goswami in Madhya Lila. Taking up where he left off, Prabhupada began rising early and studying the Bengali translations and commentaries. He would turn on his dictating machine and begin to speak, his voice a faint, harsh whisper. But as he continued, his voice grew stronger, until by the end of an hour he was speaking normally. By the time he left Vrindavan, he was working unusually fast, producing 2 tapes a day.
Okay, can you just pause for a while? We see in this whole Vrindavan episode, what reminds me is how Arjuna, when he was being taught by Dronacharya, archery, when he was asked as a child, what do you see when you are shown a target? You could only see the target and nothing else, whereas others could see so many other things. Similarly, when he had to get the win over Draupadi, he had to shoot an arrow by looking at the reflection of an object in water, and it was in oil, I guess. Anyway, so it was very difficult, but Arjuna was extremely focused. So Prabhupada was. This is what I could. This is the realization I had by seeing Prabhupada in Vrindavan. Extremely focused. I mean, despite his conditions of, despite his bodily condition, and uh, even even his mind, he was not even able to recollect whether he applied tilak, but he was so focused on serving his Guru Maharaj's mission, serving his Guru Maharaj's instruction. So, for example, even when he comes and chastises the disciples for not opening the temple, he's extremely focused on pleasing Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So his concern is that pure devotional service should not be interrupted by laziness. Pure devotional service should not be sidelined. Should not be should not be minimized by anything, by some extraneous uh, by anything extraneous. Rather, the flow of devotional service should constantly keep going. So Prabhupada was trying to get them into that flow. So he chastised them, then he was checking up with them, following up on them, and he was basically steering the whole thing. He was steering the flow of pure devotional service. So when this governor came and he realized that this visit would be very important for him to advocate the cause of advancing the spiritual master's mission, he did whatever is needed, even spoke for 20 minutes, even though he was barely able to stand, but still he stood up and spoke for 20 minutes. So this is called spiritual strength. When we pray to Balaram, in the Krishna book and other places, Prabhupada writes, Balaram means the source of strength, but we are not praying for material strength. We are praying for spiritual strength. And we see that by the virtue of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual strength, he was able to pull off something miraculous even on the physical platform. That is the secret. Higher than the body is the mind, higher than the mind is the intelligence, higher than the mind is the spirit soul. And of course, higher than the spirit soul is Krishna. So we can control our body and mind and intelligence with the soul being absorbed in Krishna consciousness. For example, Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj, they sat for 7 days without feeling hunger or thirst. How was it possible? Because of their rapt, because of the being fully absorbed. Parikshit Maharaj is hearing with rapt attention. So being so completely absorbed in spiritual consciousness, in Krishna consciousness, they had strength to overcome their material situations of hunger or thirst or whatever. Just didn't I mean, just didn't bother them, didn't affect them, because they were on a completely transcendental platform. So, and that is the strongest platform to be on. So, if one is very strongly situated in Krishna consciousness, then one can also handle the disturbances caused by the body and mind and or intelligence. So, Prabhupada was a perfect example of that, how focused he was on the mission of his spiritual master. And being that focus was the source of his spiritual strength, which also enabled him, and that spiritual strength enabled him to handle his apparently not apparently, it's real material difficulties caused by the body and mind. And of course, Prabhupada said it. Here we see how Prabhupada spoke that 80% of his leaders were not following, and that was affecting him. You know? So this is Prabhupada's, this is the responsibility of a disciple. Now one of the leaders in ISKCON, a scholar, has come up to say that, the spiritual master does not get affected by the karma of a disciple. But anyway, that's modern speculative theory. But Prabhupada and the Acharyas, especially Sanatan Goswami, the Hari Bhakti Vilas, has mentioned how the spiritual master suffers the reactions of the disciples, what the disciples do. So, despite being in a very disadvantageous situation of being affected by the karma of his disciples, his body being affected by the karma of disciples, very, very difficult situation. 2 weeks his fever took to break, malaria, barely able to stand. But Prabhupada still is a shining example that because of his being unwavering in his consciousness, in his desire to serve his spiritual master, a single pointed focus like Arjuna, he was able to overcome all material obstacles and carry on with his devotional service. Nothing could stop the flow of his devotional service. Unmotivated, uninterrupted. Any thoughts, questions, reflections? Okay, Rudradev Prabhu, you can continue.
Bombay. From November 1974 through January 1975, Srila Prabhupada stayed in Bombay. During this time, he persistently but patiently tried to obtain the no objection certificate, which would enable him to start construction of Radha Ras Vihari's beautiful temple. His close involvement with this project impressed Giriraj and others who were dedicating their lives to Hare Krishna land. As Srila Prabhupada had written in Bhagavad Gita, one has no goal in life save and except acting in Krishna consciousness just to satisfy Krishna. And while working in that way, one should think of Krishna only. I have been appointed to discharge this particular duty by Krishna. While acting in such a way, one naturally has to think of Krishna. That order of Krishna comes through disciplic succession from the bona fide spiritual master. To serve in a particular project, dedicating oneself to giving the local people Krishna consciousness was an opportunity Srila Prabhupada offered every disciple. His field was the entire world, and he was like an emperor who wanted to award vast lands to loyal sons. But his awarding of lands and projects was not for material ownership, which is always illusory, but for service to the Lord. Krishna was the proprietor of everything. Therefore, a preacher could remain in a particular area of Krishna's domain and try to free the residents from the clutches of Maya. Hare Krishna land in Bombay was one of Prabhupada's major plans. but it was only gradually evolving, as if Krishna first wanted to see the devotees pass many tests of obedience to Prabhupada's order before allowing the project to manifest. Although ISKCON owned a half dozen tenement buildings on the Juhu land, law prohibited them from evicting any of the tenants. But no law said that the owner could not add another story onto these buildings. So Srila Prabhupada had requested Mr. Sethi, a loyal life member and a construction contractor, to build rooms on the top of at least two of the tenement buildings. Eagerly, Mr. Sethi had undertaken this order and had obtained permission for the construction. Now that the work was completed, the rooms were being used for the brahmachari quarters, offices, and book storage. At last, the devotees had vacated the straw huts and had been their residence for the first days on the land. This move not only relieved them from living in nasty rat-infested quarters, but also allowed them to tear down the huts, and demolition of the huts had been a stipulation for the city would issue the NOC, before the city would issue the NOC. Another major objection from the city had been that the temple's bhajan would create a nuisance, and that point had to be satisfied first and foremost. When the police saw Prabhupada's drawing of a projected temple and hotel, they admitted that within such a big temple, the kirtan would not create as much noise as it did at present. So they agreed to accept the master plan of Hare Krishna land and remove their objections based on nuisance, provided ISKCON tear down the straw huts and widen the access road so that the tenants could approach the back portion of the land. Each of these legal demands involved many detailed points of contention. It was like a long, drawn-out chess game. But Prabhupada was experienced, cautious, and determined. He proposed to stay at the Hare Krishna land for several months to help Giriraj, Mr. Sethi, and the others. Meanwhile, Prabhupada insisted that the spiritual program at Hare Krishna land go forward unabated. Even without a permanent temple, first 500 to 700 guests were coming for the Sunday feasts. Giriraj had reported to Prabhupada that Janmashtami in Bombay had been a great success, with several thousand people coming to see the deities and take prasadam. For Srila Prabhupada, who was now accustomed to staying in places like New York or Los Angeles for a week or less, to stay in Bombay for a 3-month period confirmed again that Hare Krishna land was very dear to him. It was his special child. When danger threatened, he became alarmed and protective. And when success came, he was very proud and wanted to tell the world. Prabhupada seemed satisfied that at least some construction was always going on. He asked that Mr. Sethi build a brick wall around the property, even though parts of the wall were sometimes torn down at night by gundas. Build something, Prabhupada said, even if it's just one brick, but go ahead with construction. Just as when, in acquiring the Bombay property, Prabhupada had understood the great value of possession even before attaining the deed, so with construction, he insisted they go ahead even without full permission. The work must begin, Prabhupada said. Whether you have got sufficient men and bricks or not, begin even little, so it can be understood that we have begun. Srila Prabhupada had received word from Vrindavan that the newly elected governor of Uttar Pradesh, Dr. Channa Reddy, had visited the temple site. Hearing this, Prabhupada decided to invite him for a scheduled opening of the Krishna Bhavan. Tentatively, the date is fixed up on the Sri Ram Navami, the birthday of Lord Ramchandra. Probably it will be the fixed up date because we are demanding We're depending on the progress of the construction work. If you kindly give me your consent, we can print Your Excellency's name on the invitation card as the chief guest and inaugurator of the temple. You're already our member as well as a great devotee of Lord Krishna. So we shall feel it a great privilege if you kindly agree to this proposal. Prabhupada follows his invitation to the governor with a letter to Surabi in Vrindavan. Everything must be 100% completed by the end of March. Is the contractor cheating? That means it will never be finished. Simply we have to put money. From the photos I have seen, there is not very much progress. What to do? I want no explanations. I want to see everything finished. If there is still doubt, please tell me frankly. Invitations were coming in for Srila Prabhupada to travel to different places, and another world tour was developing. Prabhupada wrote to Hridayananda Goswami, who was inviting him to visit Mexico and Caracas. Yes, I want to come there very much. Now we are in Bombay trying to get permission from the government to build our temple, and it appears that we will possibly be getting permission next week. If this works out, then I will immediately be going to Honolulu, and from Honolulu I can go directly to Mexico City, then Caracas, then to Australia by the end of Jan. If the Bombay situation is not settled up, I may have to stay till mid-Jan or so, and then in mid or end of Jan, I will be going to Australia to stay for a month. By mid-January of 1975, the city finally issued the NOC. Prabhupada was jubilant and immediately called for a cornerstone laying ceremony. He had already held a groundbreaking and cornerstone laying ceremony in March 1972 for first moving to the land. Nevertheless, he wanted another one, as this would actually signify the beginning of construction of the temple. He therefore devised a festival involving all life members and friends of ISKCON in Bombay. Srila Prabhupada was ready to travel, and this time, more than ever, he impressed on his leaders in Bombay that the temple construction should go ahead without interruption. No doubt there would be new opposition from the government, but such opposition would be overcome as in the past by Krishna's grace. The devotees, however, would have to be very determined. This was the reward for working for Prabhupada in Hare Krishna land, that one gained determination in the face of trouble, and knew that by staying with one's service, he was pleasing Krishna and Krishna's pure devotee. Srila Prabhupada toured widely again, traveling eastward via Tokyo and Hawaii to Los Angeles. While traveling, he received word that Governor Reddy had accepted the invitation to attend the Vrindavan temple opening on Rama Navami. He also received an encouraging report from Surabi, assuring him that this time the temple opening would definitely take place. I'm encouraged that you expect to have everything completed on time, Prabhupada wrote. This I want. Prabhupada traveled to Mexico City and Caracas. Again, in answering his mail, he was saying he would soon meet everyone in Vrindavan. To an Indian life member, who wrote him for advice in touring foreign temples, he wrote, "By the 20th of March, I will be in Calcutta, and you can see me there. I shall advise you personally. You are also invited to participate in our Mayapur festival during Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance day ceremony, as well as the opening celebration of Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan on Rama Navami day. The governor of UP will also come there to participate, and many other important and respectable gentlemen will also be coming. I hope you will also come with your wife and son and mother and encourage us by taking part in the festival. Leaving South America, Prabhupada moved quickly, stopping in Miami, Atlanta, Dallas, and New York, all within a month of his departure from India. He then went to London, stopped in Tehran, and returned to India on March 16. It was Prabhupada's 8th trip around the world in 10 years. Early in the morning of March 23, Srila Prabhupada left the Calcutta temple for Mayapur, traveling in a caravan of 5 cars. Prabhupada was in the first car. 3 following cars carried his sannyasi disciples, and the last car carried his sister, Bhavatarini, and other ladies. As usual, Prabhupada asked to stop at the mango orchard. Devi Shakti Dasi. They all sat around together, just like cowherd boys. Prabhupada in the center, taking his breakfast fruits. It was a Kadashi, and I had made a cake for Prabhupada out of dates and coconut, very fancy. When Prabhupada opened his tiffin and saw it, he said, "Oh, what is this? Who made this? Who has made this?" So Achitananda Swami told him I had made it, and he started eating it right away. Prabhupada said he liked it. Then they washed their hands, and we were on our way again to Mayapur. Mayapur 23, Mayapur March 23, 1975. For this year's festival, almost 500 devotees from around the world had gathered, and Prabhupada, while taking his morning walks in the nearby fields, while entering the temple of Radha Madhav, or while lecturing from Chaitanya Charitamrita, was the central attractive feature. Each morning after giving the class, he would circumambulate the temple room, followed by his disciples. A brass bell hanging from the ceiling on either side of the deity's altar, and Prabhupada, while circumambulating the deities, would go up to one of the bells and ring it several times, pulling the rope while the kirtan continued wildly. Then, with the cane in hand, he would walk around the back of the deity's altar and emerge on the other side to ring the other bell. The devotees would jump up and down close around him, singing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, smiling with great pleasure. Prabhupada would continue the length of the temple room, past the pictures of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Gaura Kishore Das Babaji, and Bhakti Vinod Thakur, and then come around and up the other side of the temple room to the first bell again and strongly ring it. After half a dozen such blissful circumambulations, he would leave the temple. While the kirtan continued to roar, coming out into the bright morning sunshine, he would walk up the broad staircase to his room. On at least 2 occasions during that festival, Prabhupada became stunned in trance while delivering the morning lecture. One time he was speaking in appreciation of the sacrifice of his disciples, who had spent so much money and come so far from their devotees, from their homes in America, Europe, and Australia to render service and attend the festival in Mayapur. "You're all young," he was saying. You have a good opportunity, but I'm an old man. I have no opportunity." And with these words, he suddenly fell completely silent. Such silence before 500 disciples producing a feeling of suspended time. Everyone waited. Finally, one of the devotees began chanting, "Hare Krishna," and Srila Prabhupada returned to external consciousness, uttering "Hare Krishna." He told the devotees, "Have kirtan," and went to his room. Prabhupada again supervised the annual meeting of his Governor Body Commission and personally approved or modified all their decisions. ISKCON was indeed growing, but as Prabhupada has told his friend, the aged Gopalacharya in Madras, Krishna and Krishna's institution are non-different. If the devotees are thinking of Krishna's institution, they will not forget Krishna. By insisting on the devotees' participation in the annual India pilgrimage, Prabhupada was solidifying the spiritual basis of ISKCON, his transcendental institution. To gather his devotees like this was the reason he had prayed and struggled to erect centers in the dhams. He wanted to extend the purifying shelter of Mayapur and Vrindavan to all his followers. Now and in the future, bit by bit, the plan was coming together. The whole world was being saved by Lord Chaitanya's movement. Vrindavan, April 16. When Srila Prabhupada arrived to finally conduct the Krishna Balaram Mandir opening, he was pleasantly surprised to see the 3 tall domes rising over the temple. The domes had been constructed entirely during the 8th month since his last visit. The 4-story international guest house had also been completely built during his absence. Surabhi had supervised workers in day and night shifts to get everything done on time. The tall central dome and 2 side domes, one over each altar, were magnificent. Their graceful form led the mind to higher thoughts and suggested an existence beyond the material world. The strength and beauty of the domes reminded one that beneath resided the deity of the Supreme Lord. A temple was to enlighten people, to remove their knee signs, and the domes eloquently spoke of this purpose. They could be seen for miles rising boldly above the landscape of Vrindavan, proclaiming the worship of Krishna and Balaram. Each dome was topped by a copper kalash consisting of 3 balls representing the lower, middle, and higher planets. And at the top, the eternal Sudarshana Chakra and the spinning wheel weapon of Lord Vishnu. The spinning wheel weapon of Lord Vishnu. The Sudarshan Chakra was Krishna himself. And just to see this glorious symbol atop the mandir made the devotee feel victorious and satisfied. Even the guests could not help but regard it with awe. Atop the Sudarshan Chakras were copper victory flags. As Prabhupada toured the completed building, he continually looked up at the domes. Oh, he said, the domes have come out very nice. What do you think? He turned to the devotees accompanying him. They're magnificent, said Hamsadutta. Yes, Prabhupada, said Tamakrishna Goswami. I think that Surabhi has done a nice job. Yes, Prabhupada smiled. Everyone is telling how nice Surabhi is doing. Prabhupada turned to Surabhi, who had gone with little sleep for weeks. But I can't say that. Only me. I'm criticizing you because that is my job. I have to always criticize the disciples. No less than 600 devotees from ISKCON centers around the world had come to Vrindavan as part of the annual Indian pilgrimage. The high point was to be the installation of the deities and the opening of the temple. Final preparations were going furiously, cleanups, decorations, cooking. Many important life members and guests had come and were staying in their private rooms in the 40-room guest house. Prabhupada's vision had finally come to pass. He had created probably the most beautiful and opulent temple in Vrindavan, certainly the most alive with dynamic devotion and preaching spirit. And along with it, he had built one of the best local hotels for visitors with an eye for Krishna Bhakti. Touring the grounds, Prabhupada walked into the sunken courtyard its marble floor clean and dazzling. There was no rented house in America, something built for another purpose. It was a temple, just like the temples in Vaikuntha described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It is heaven on earth, Prabhupada said. I think it surpasses all the temples in India. Prabhupada stood smiling before the Tamala tree. Its venerable branches spread throughout one corner of the courtyard, as he recounted how there had been a discussion of cutting it down, and he had prevented it. Tamala trees are associated with the pastimes of Srimati Radharani and are very rare. In Vrindavan, there were perhaps only 3, one here, one at Seva Kunj, and one in the courtyard of Radha Damodar temple. That the Tamala tree was growing so luxuriantly, Papa said, indicated that the devotees were performing genuine bhakti. Convinced that the temple was actually ready, Prabhupada entered his residence just between the temple and the guest house. Many details demanded his attention, and many visiting disciples were present. Thus, in Ramanareti, in a place where there was no temple, a pure devotee desired, let there be a temple and seva, devotional service. And what had once been an empty lot was now a place of pilgrimage. Such is the power of the desires of a pure devotee.
Yeah, we have come to the end of volume 5, but there's an epilogue. So we'll read that and then we'll conclude. We have some realizations and discussion.
Okay.
Let's finish the epilogue also.
Srila Prabhupada would often say of his devotional service in India, Vrindavan is my residence, Bombay is my office, and Mayapur is where I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bombay is the biggest commercial city in India. Prabhupada's business was pure devotional service to Krishna. And in Bombay, he dealt more with the managerial aspects of Krishna consciousness in India. He had incorporated ISKCON in India with the main branch in Bombay. All other branches in ISKCON in India, therefore, were legally part of the Bombay incorporation. In Bombay, Prabhupada had cultivated more lawyers and businessmen as life members and earned more friends of his society than in any other city in India. So whenever he was in Bombay, he often sought legal advice, not just for the Bombay Center, but also about his other affairs in India. Since Bombay was a modern city with professional and other facilities on a level with many Western cities, Prabhupada wanted to locate the Indian division of his book trust there for printing Hindi translations of his books, as well as his English versions for the Indian market. Bombay, unlike Vrindavan and Mayapur, was not a dham, but a bustling, wealthy city. ISKCON's biggest donors lived there. Although Srila Prabhupada's demeanor was entirely transcendental in Bombay, and his activities were often the same as elsewhere, speaking on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and the worshipping the deity. Nevertheless, Prabhupada called it his office. And though it was his office, he wanted a temple there. Mayapur, Prabhupada said, is where I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada conceived of a temple to be built in Mayapur that would be the grandest of all temples in his movement. He and his devotees would worship the Supreme Lord there in such a magnificent style that the whole world would be attracted to Prabhupada's place of worship, Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir. According to the Srimad Bhagavatam, the prescribed worship for this age is Sankirtan and chanting the holy names of God. Sankirtana worship emanated from Mayapur, the original dham of Lord Caitanya. In the age of Kali, states Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna appears in a golden form as Lord Caitanya, and his activities is to chant Hare Krishna. People with sufficient intelligence will worship him in this form. Srila Prabhupada wanted to make the most wonderful worship of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his birthplace, and thus completely fulfill the predictions of the previous acharyas, who foresaw a great Vedic city rising from the plains of Navadip. Mayapur could also be considered Prabhupada's place of worship because his spiritual master, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, had preached extensively there, and because his Samadhi was there. Since Srila Prabhupada's entire preaching mission was in the service of his spiritual master, he worshipped his spiritual master through his preaching in Mayapur. Mayapur was the origin and symbol of preaching Krishna consciousness, because there Lord Caitanya and Nityananda actually began the Sankirtan movement that Prabhupada was now carrying all over the world. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to preach the Sankirtan movement of love of Krishna throughout the entire world, and therefore, during his presence, he inspired the Sankirtan movement. Specifically, he sent Rupa Goswami to Vrindavan and Nityananda to Bengal, and personally went to South India. In this way, he kindly left the task of preaching his cult in the rest of the world to the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Vrindavan is Prabhupada's residence. Religious people in India as well as religious scholars in the West saw Prabhupada as a Vaishnava sadhu from Vrindavan. When he began his preaching in New York City, he would often introduce himself as coming from Vrindavan. Here I am now, sitting in New York, he once said, the world's greatest city, and my heart is always hankering after that Vrindavan. I shall be very happy to return to my Vrindavan, that sacred place. The people of Vrindavan also thought of Prabhupada as their hometown success. Upon retiring from family life in 1954, Prabhupada had gone to live in Vrindavan, first at a temple near Keshighat, and then at the Radha Damodar temple. After taking sannyas in 1959, he had continued to reside in Vrindavan, and when not living there, to reserve his 2 rooms at Radha Damodar. Vrindavan is the home of Krishna consciousness, a place of Krishna's childhood pastimes, the place where the 6 Goswamis sent by Lord Caitanya had excavated holy places, written transcendental lectures, literatures, and built temples. Any devotee could feel at home there, and thousands of Vrindavan's residents carried bead bags, chanted Hare Krishna, and wore the Vaishnav tilak and dress. Vrindavan belonged to Radha and Krishna, and this was still acknowledged by the residents of present-day Vrindavan. Ultimately, Vrindavan is revealed only to the pure devotee. Vrindavan is the eternal residence of spiritual souls in their eternal relationship with Krishna. The Vrindavan in India is a transcendental replica of Golok Vrindavan, the eternal planet where Krishna resides in the spiritual world. The pure devotees aspire to attain to Golok Vrindavan after finishing their life in this world, and Prabhupada, therefore, as a pure devotee of Krishna, naturally felt at home in Vrindavan. He sometimes said that if he were to become very ill, he would prefer not to go to a hospital, but to simply go to Vrindavan and there pass his last days. To spread the glories of Vrindavan, Prabhupada had left Vrindavan, but like a traveler away from home, he always thought of returning.
Jai. Okay, so we finished volume 5 of the Lilamrita. And we see how Srila Prabhupada's, you can turn off the, we're not going to read further today. Turn off the screen share. Okay. So we see how everything fell in place finally because of Srila Prabhupada's single-pointed determination. So if we follow in the footsteps of a pure devotee, if we keep our determination intact, then everything will fall in place for the service of the Lord. This is the lesson that we can see in Prabhupada's determination in carrying out the instructions of the spiritual master. He attributed everything to his spiritual master. So like that, if we have that single-pointed focus on trying to please Srila Prabhupada, then everything, and if we need to keep that fixed, cannot get carried away by external circumstances or by people or nothing. Like Prabhupada said, my God brothers only gave me depression, repression, suppression, compression, something like that. He said, but I went on with my work. So we need to remain focused on carrying out Srila Prabhupada's desires. That single pointed focus, like how Prabhupada himself exhibited, is the secret for all success. And everything will fall in place if we can carry that spirit of, carry that focus. Okay, I'll open up for reflections. Any questions or comments or reflections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Can you hear me, Prabhu?
Yes.
Sorry, Prabhuji, because this one I was traveling from temple to home, so I could not ask the question in the previous set. So just I wanted to know that there was this one that if you are not following properly, the Guru will take all the sins of these disciples or those things.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to know, Prabhuji, like, will they, like, now spiritual master, when he is present with his as Vapu, in that only he will like get all those like sins of his disciples, or like how it is, Prabhuji?
Yeah, but also if we don't, that's correct. Yeah, that's correct. But at the same time, if a disciple doesn't go back to God, I proper wrote this. Then proper wrote this in letters that then don't make the spiritual master come back to deliver you. You know, so that's the problem. That once he goes back to the spiritual world, the disciple should be strict enough to follow, to go back to the spiritual world without him having to come back to deliver the disciple.
Okay. Thank you. Roji, really, I have a question from really last week. Means last week there was no class. Before that, because I was not there, I could not attend last week. But I don't know where I have noted them. I will, till then, if anybody is having any this one, they can carry on. Then I will ask.
There's nobody else who has raised their hand, so you can go ahead and ask.
Yeah, I'll just I don't remember exactly what was the question, so I have written somewhere. I'll just check it and.
Fine.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. We have time though, actually. We finished about 5 minutes ahead of time today. 10 minutes ahead of time, I think. So now the question and answer session. Nobody has anything to share? Okay, so Indulekha Mataji, it looks like there's nothing to share. I mean, no one has anything to say, so we'll wait for you to ask your question.
Yes, Prabhu, but I'm just finding I don't know where I have noted it down.
Yeah. You can take your time, I guess.
Yes, sorry, Prabhu.
No worries. Shailesh Goinde Prabhu, you have anything to say?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Sorry, I was just busy serving, which is why I wasn't interjecting. So my apologies. Just make a very quick observation, Prabhuji. It's quite a heart-wrenching and quite a moving section that we've just read with Prabhupada's illness on one hand and his determination on the other, with both one showing material qualities and the other one showing spiritual qualities as to how he's overcoming those material impediments. It's just amazing. I just found it amazing how he was 105 degrees and in temperature and still stood up for 20 minutes and spoke. That was just eye-opening, isn't it? I'm also not sure what the expression is, and I'm not sure how to express myself properly here, but in terms of, I've noticed in particular over the last few sessions that there is quite a series of criticisms Prabhupada has of Gurudas Prabhu and his management of Vrindavan, and consistently underperforming, as it were. That's the wrong word, perhaps, but sort of Prabhupada being consistently what's the word? Displeased with his efforts. Should we read anything into any of this? I mean, I don't want to be controversial about any of this, but
no, I would think that I mean, it's a good point that you brought up, a good observation. Although I didn't observe it, but now that you said it, it's true. But what immediately struck me was that Prabhupada was persistent to bring him up to the proper standard of performance. I mean, like, for example, there are times where he says, okay, what can I do? But it's not like that. But he's persistent with Gurudas to try to bring him to the proper standard. So that itself is quite interesting, that Prabhupada is giving him the attention to and trying to bring him up to the standard that he expects from him. That's remarkable. Instead of just, okay, what can be done? He's not ignoring it. So I take it in that, I mean, that's what struck me when you brought it up. Because there were disciples whom with Prabhupada would just give me a second. Sorry, that was the mixer going on in the kitchen. So, okay. So I had to, I mean, yeah. Okay. So I had, yeah, I mean, there were instances where Prabhupada, while dealing with some disciples, he would just get disgusted and say, okay, do whatever you want, or just, yeah. But then here, Prabhupada is consistent, which also shows that unless a person is willing to learn, Prabhupada is never so persistent. I think there are two different things. One is limitation, the other is the attitude. So if the attitude was not right, then Prabhupada would deal with it accordingly. But if the attitude is right, Prabhupada was persistent in his effort to bring the person to the right standard of performance.
Yes, Prabhu, thank you. The other observation I had was, well, I guess Prabhupada mentions quite alarmingly, I guess, for me, that up to 80% of his disciples were not following regulations or his instructions. That's quite a high percentage in his own estimation. He says that again. How should we read that?
It must be true. I mean, that's the first thing that occurred to me. So, I mean, it's not very surprising either, because if you look at the standards of pure devotional service, it's quite high. Actually, it's quite high, and it's not unusual to expect devotees who are fresh and new and who are conditioned according to various backgrounds that they've grown up. It's not easy. It's not easy. I mean, it's not, what do you call it? Yeah, it's not easy. I mean, of course, on the other hand, we say Krishna consciousness is easy. Okay. Recently, I gave a class in which someone asked this question and I clarified it. Okay, you have the classic yoga systems. Okay, those yoga systems are difficult, whereas Bhakti yoga system is easy. But there is one thing which is common between all the yoga systems and Bhakti yoga, which is intensity. So Bhagavatam says, whether you are akama, whether you are sarvakama, or whether you are mokshakama, whether you are free from material desires, whether you are full of material desires, or whether you desire liberation, tivrena bhakti yogena. Bhakti yoga is to be performed tivrena, with intensity. So what is common among all the yoga systems is intensity of practice. Now, other yoga systems are difficult. Our system is easy. But whether easy or whether difficult, intensity is required. So because it is easy, it does not mean that, okay, we can just become lazy and become spaced out, as we say in ISKCON. So the point is, it is not enough to say easy and just leave it. No, it's easy, but it requires intensity. Intensity is common across all yoga systems. So just the question of whether the process is easy or difficult. If it is difficult and you have to be intense, oh my God, it's quite a difficult thing to do. But if it's easy, but you have to be intense, it is possible. It's possible. So I guess that's the difference, that because of the backgrounds that different devotees may come from, including me or including you or including all of us. So there may be so many distractions, so many temptations, so many different things which come along the way. So although it is easy, it is important for us to maintain the intensity of practice. If we don't maintain the intensity of practice, we'll just get carried away in different directions.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Indulekha Kripa Mataji, were you able to get your question?
Yes, I got it. But before that, on this discussion, I have a small question, Prabhuji, about chastising and all.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, Prabhupada was chastising his disciples and all. In the same way, in the temple, like our Shiksha Guru or some other senior devotees, they can chastise us, and they generally chastise us. And is it okay that should we take it that it is their right to chastise us like that, because they are not happy always to criticize or to chastise us by our even the small mistakes or some incompetency from us in doing service or anything?
I would answer this question by asking you, you're wondering whether their chastisement is appropriate or not, correct? That's a question, right?
But, yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Do we wonder whether praise is appropriate or not anytime? No. Why? Yeah. So we only wonder whether chastisement is appropriate or not. Why? Because we are affected by duality, right? We're affected by duality. That's why we are thinking in those terms. If otherwise we would think, why am I getting glorified? I mean, is it appropriate, not appropriate? When it comes to glorification, we don't think like that, right? So the point when I say focus and intensity, it means whether you get praised, whether you get chastised. Okay, if you get glorified, then you can say, okay, I need to do much more. So let me, that should inspire you to do much more.
Yeah.
Whether you get chastised, okay, I'm not good enough, I need to improve myself, right? So again, it should inspire you. So whether we get praised or whether we get chastised, we should take it as an opportunity for growth. But if we are overcome by false ego, then we get affected by the chastisement. Then our self-esteem goes down, then this goes down, that goes down, and all these kind of things. But if we take it, okay, how shall I take this as an inspiration to improve my devotional service? Then it works fine. So it depends on the person's state of consciousness. Sometimes, okay, let's take it that you are inappropriately chastised. Okay, objectively you're inappropriately chastised. So what?
Yes.
So what? For example, of course, I'm not talking about abuse. I'm just talking about chastisement here. So, I mean, then you ask, what is abuse? What is? I mean, let's set that discussion for later. But now let's take the simple fact of chastisement. Okay. So, like Prabhupada, when we read how when he went to when he came with Kirtananda Swami to India, that taxi driver in the middle of the night, when he took him to Chippivada temple, he ripped him off, right? I mean, like charged excess. How did Prabhupada react to that?
Yes.
Prabhupada simply reacted that I must have done something in my past life to him. So he's doing something to me now. So even if we find the chastisement is inappropriate, if we are rightly situated in Krishna consciousness, we take it okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, what happened here is not right, but however it happened to me, so therefore I must have done something due to which in the past life or something which is coming back to me like this, you know. So in any condition of life, there's no scope for discouragement. Okay, Krishna has given me something for me to be purified. Okay, let's move ahead now. You know, because the moment we take every situation in life as a source of inspiration, this is very important for devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement. Those of us who are trying to attain love of God, we should take every situation in life as a source of inspiration. Now, easier said than done. When you're facing difficulties, how to take that as a source of inspiration? Therefore, we need to hear the Bhagavatam attentively. Just like Parikshit Maharaj, he takes that as a stepping stone for him to go and hear from Shukadeva Goswami. When he's cursed by Maharaj, so when he's cursed by that Brahmin boy, Shringi, he takes it as a source of inspiration. Okay, let me just go and do it now. So, from these great souls, from these great devotees, we take it like that. Okay, this is a source of inspiration. Every situation should be taken as a source of inspiration. But easier said than done. When it's difficult to do it, then we need to take inspiration from the Bhagavatam, from personalities who have done it.
Yes, Prabhu. The difficulty is when we hear that chastisement. Later, maybe after 1 day or 2 days, then we will be settled with those things and we may take in the proper spirit or anything. But the thing is that when we hear the chastisement, we will do generally seva with lot of enthusiasm or with lot of difficulty, sometimes lot of problem we undergo, and then we do that service. But if there is like we say, they take very small things and they will make it, no, this is wrong, that is wrong. To take it really, it is very difficult at that moment for the special. Later, maybe we can take, okay, something that's happened, that is what is the will of Krishna or something like that we can say. But at that moment, it is really difficult to take these chastisements.
See, there are two different things. Yes. One is the feeling, the other is the response to the feeling. Okay, you cannot control the feeling because feelings are produced by the mind. Thinking, feeling, willing, right? So the feeling is based on the thinking that we have had in the past, conditioning, you know. So that is the instant feeling that you get. Based on our conditioning, you get a feeling, right? Bad feeling or whatever. But it doesn't have to go to the stage of willing. Stop it at the stage of feeling. That's it. But you should know that you are not the feeling. Quite often devotees think when they have a feeling, they are the feeling. But you are not the feeling. You are different from that feeling. The feeling is produced by your mind, which is your greatest enemy anyway. Until you come to the stage of perfect sense control, mind control, the mind is the enemy, right? So the feeling is not you. Feeling is produced by the mind. What is in your control? The reaction to the feeling. The word responsibility comes from two words, response and ability. The ability to respond is called responsibility. Okay. So you always have the ability to respond. You have a certain feeling which is produced by the mind. It's not you. It's produced by your mind. So you have a ability to respond to that feeling. So if you respond to that feeling in an appropriate Krishna conscious manner, you are properly situated in pure devotional service.
Yes. Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. And regarding the question of that last class, Prabhuji, like we were discussing about desiring something which is in less spiritual platform only, which is like for bhakti, for the improvement of bhakti. So can we desire for other people? For example, we meet many people who are having a difficult situation to practice Krishna consciousness. Sometimes in their family or some difficulty will be there. They cannot really follow. They have to secretly follow. Sometimes chanting also are not allowed in their house because they want to do, but they have some adverse situations. So can we desire for those people so that they can come into Krishna consciousness or to like something like that, or for our children? Or
we should not just desire, we should pray, no? We should
Okay.
pray that
Yeah,
the
we
whole
pray also.
world,
Yes.
we should pray,
Yes.
first of all, we should have the desire that the whole world be engaged in Krishna consciousness. Okay. That should be our
Yes.
desire. That's what that's the goal of our mission, no? That we are a missionary movement. We want the whole world to be engaged in Krishna consciousness. But specifically people whom we know who are struggling to practice Krishna consciousness, we should pray for them.
Yes.
That is the right thing to do, no? That is our expected duty.
Yeah. No, because we can we desire like that they are at least they get at least better
Desire,
situations so they can practice.
Desire is one step lower. You have to go higher than that desire and pray that they're able to practice
Yes.
properly. Why not? Supposed to pray.
Okay, Prabhuji. Yes. Okay, Prabhuji.
I mean, at least pray that their devotional service is not interrupted by the circumstances, that they remain always enthusiastic and progress further and further in devotional service. That we have to pray. So if Krishna bestows his mercy, anything can be handled. So we're praying to Krishna, please bestow your mercy upon them so that they can handle their situations well. First of all, Krishna does not give any situation which cannot be handled. He gives a situation which can be handled. So what are we praying to Krishna? We're praying to Krishna that may they be able to handle the situation in the best possible manner.
Okay.
Please give them the intelligence, please give them the strength to handle it in the best possible manner. Not to handle it, because Krishna doesn't give any situation which cannot handle, but in the best possible manner.
Thank you.
We are desiring the welfare of everybody. This is called para dukkha dukhi. So we are sad seeing their situation. We want them to improve very nicely. Also, not just desire, pray. Okay, or other words, desiring is perfectly fine. We can do more than desiring also.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll resume again next week. Thank you all very much for joining. Next week, you're beginning volume 6 of the Prabhupada. Vanchikalpatarabhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha padithanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavyo namo namaha. The Prabhupada